Morning, church. This morning I want us to continue a lesson we began a couple of weeks ago, looking at what is sometimes called the parable of the prodigal son, but I really don't like that title. I'd rather us call it the parable of the two sons, because that's very, very important. Jesus is addressing two different situations, two different challenges in this parable, and I think it's important that we recognize both of them as he does. You remember when we introduced this parable in Luke 15, we talked about the fact that Luke begins the chapter in the first couple of verses by saying that you have scribes and Pharisees who are very critical of Jesus because they see that he's eating with what are termed publicans and sinners. The fact of the matter is, I believe Luke shares that with us because he wants us to understand the context in which this parable is going to be placed and the audience to whom Jesus is speaking, because Jesus is actually going to be addressing this parable to those publicans and sinners and to those scribes and Pharisees. That's why I believe there's part one and part two of this parable, and why both of those parts are so very important. Now, in order to set the stage for what we're going to be looking at this morning, I want us again to just read the parable and have it in our minds. And so you can follow along on the screens. This is the ESV, follow along in your Bible. But let's just listen to him as he tells this story again. And he said, there was a man who had two sons. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate. And no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father. And I will say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. But when his son, go back here. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother's come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound.' But he was angry, refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. And when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' And he said to him, 'Son, you're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found.'" Now, in particular, what I would like for us to notice this morning is that these two sons follow two different paths to happiness and fulfillment. And I want us to think about those paths and the implications of them. I think it's very important. The younger son follows the path that I'm going to call the path of self-discovery. Nobody is going to tell me how to live. Clearly, he's determined, I'm going to make my own path. I'm going to find my own way. And then you've got the older brother who's following a completely different path in his life, a path that I'm going to call the path of moral conformity. This says, I'm going to play by the rules. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to live how I'm supposed to live. I'm going to be responsible. And that's the way you need to go. Now, as I note, these two paths haven't changed in 2,000 years, have they? They continue to represent a culture and a moral divide that is just as deep now as it's ever been. Just look at our country and what do you see? You see people who are following the path of self-discovery, don't you? Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody's going to give me the rules. I'm going to go my own way. And you've got others who are saying, oh no, you need to follow the rules. You need to play by the rules. One of the reasons the country is having the problems it is because people aren't following the rules like they should. Now, what I want us to do is for a minute explore these two paths further. Let's first of all consider that path of self-discovery. That younger son is determined to find his own path to happiness and fulfillment. He clearly resents and rejects his father's way of life. As we've talked about, he just absolutely lacerates his father by telling him, basically, as far as I'm concerned, I wish you were dead, but you're not. And so because you're not, I want to treat you as though you were dead to me. And I want you to sell off my portion. I want you to hand it to me. And I want to go off and I want to find my own way in life, because clearly he despises the way that his father's gone. He wants no part of that. How many people are going to make that journey to that far-off land to find themselves? How many people have made that journey, continue to make that journey? You know, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about 50 years ago. The Beatles were huge in this country at that time. Here were four young men, and I really don't think they realized at that time how they, to a great degree, were beginning to shape our culture. Now, they were reflecting our culture, but I think they were also in the process of shaping our culture. Rich beyond Crusoe's wildest dreams. Four of the most famous men in the whole world, and if you'll remember, miserable and directionless, trying to find their way in life. And one of the things they did was start this path of self-discovery. And what do? They take off, remember, and they go to India. And they find themselves a guru. And they start following Eastern mysticism, and in particular Lennon and Harrison really buy into that. And you hear songs come out of that like Hare Krishna and so on. And they're looking to drugs and to Eastern mysticism to somehow discover meaning in life, who they are and what they're all about. And to me, they just kind of epitomize a segment of time in our culture and really the beginning of a movement that we continue to see today. Because just look at modern day shamanism. More and more people are seeking out these shamans. And they're saying, listen, take me on a peyote-fed journey, some kind of hallucinogenic, and open me up to the world about me and let me see it unfettered by the conformity to societal rules that we see today. And so more and more you find these people searching and looking via shamans and other spiritual guides and drugs in order to follow this path of self-discovery. And so this kid epitomizes a segment of society that has always existed and continues to exist today. On the other hand, you find the older brother who's following a path of, in many ways, very opposite, of moral conformity. Listen to the older brother as he talks to his dad. Boy, he's angry with his father. You hear him, he's disrespectful. Look! Now, you don't talk to your dad like that. Not in that culture, not at that time. But I mean, he's filled with rage and resentment. I have never disobeyed your command? How dare you treat him like that and treat me like you're treating me? I've always played by the rules. Moral conformists believe that playing by the rules is all important. Man, that's what it's all about. Moral conformity demands that you do what's in the interest of family and community before you seek your own will. And it's interesting, you see this reflected, for instance, the British royal family. Prince Charles made a mess of his life with Diana and then with Camilla and all that. And the bottom line was he married Diana out of duty. He wanted to marry Camilla. Marry Diana out of duty. Because why? Because you're a prince. Because you have a certain responsibility and you fulfill that responsibility. And over again, you see that reflected in many of movies and things that talk about relationships in the past, where because this would be a good economic deal for your family, or because this would politically tie two countries together, you will not follow your heart, you'll follow duty. Conformity. It's what it's all about. This path is convinced that conforming to biblical and moral standards qualify you as a good person. Now, here's the issue. Both these paths lead to the same place. They lead to alienation from the Father. How quick are both conformists and self-discoverers to point the finger at their opposites as a source of societal problems? You see a lot of finger pointing today, and the fingers point from both directions. The self-discoverers, well, the conformists want to quash anyone not following their path. I mean, they want to lay down rules. They want everybody to play by the same rule book. They don't want me to have any freedom at all to pursue what I want to pursue. I mean, you hear that all the time. And on the other hand, you're the moral conformists. Well, the reason that we've got all the problems we do is because of people who refuse to play by the rules. If people just played by the rules, this world will be a much, much better place. And fingers just keep getting pointed like this. But bottom line, while they're pointing their fingers at each other, what they're forgetting is, in both cases, they end up alienated. Now, both sons are resentful of their father's authority. The one son makes it very clear right from the start, Dad, give me what's mine and let me go because I don't want any part of you. But the other son is just as resentful of his father's authority. Now, he's morally conforming. He's playing by the rules, okay? But he's resentful of his dad. Look, how dare you treat this son like you're treating him? That older son, think about it, he is outraged by grace. He's outraged by forgiveness. Because this younger son is being treated in the way that he wants to be treated and feels like he's been cheated out of. Both sons are more interested in fulfilling their own desires than they are in pleasing their father. Bottom line, both of them are wrestling with selfishness. Now, we always think of the younger son as following that path. And when you start down this path of self-discovery, I mean, think about it for a minute. Is this kid thinking about anybody beside himself when he heads out? Does he care? Or is he willing to consider how badly he's hurting his father? The damage that he's doing to his family? How he's cheating his older brother when he demands his portion of the inheritance? No, he's not thinking about that. He's thinking about himself. And he's completely choosing to, I don't know whether he's ignoring or denying the damage that he's doing to his family and to his brother. But he doesn't care. Because you see, that path to self-discovery is all wrapped up in me. It's all about me. And think about it today. Isn't that true? This path to discovery, self-discovery, is all about me. It's what I want. It's what I desire. And if that hurts other people, if that wreaks havoc, so what? Because it's very narcissistic. It's very solipsistic. It's very self-centered. And that's where that young man's coming from. And so, boy, we look at the younger son and we go, oh, what a mess. Hey, what about that older brother? Why has he been so faithfully serving his dad? Why has he played by the rules? Because all of this was one day, 2/3 of it, going to be mine. And I played by the rules and he didn't. And he took 1/3 of it. And now I've only got 2/3 that's going to get split up again. And I've had to manage this place, and I've had to do all this work and toe the line. What am I getting out of it? You see, in his own way, he's just as selfish, he's just as self-centered, he's just as self-focused as that younger son was. Now, here's an interesting contrast. I want you to think about this. It's the younger son's recognition of his unrighteousness which brings him back to the Father. It's while he's sitting in the pig pen among the pods, in the middle of the mess that he's made, deserted by everybody, that he goes, oh my word, I need to go back home, don't I? And I need to apologize for the mess I've made. It's his unrighteousness and his honest confrontation with his unrighteousness which sends him back to the Father. On the other hand, and I think it's ironic, it's the elder son's self-declared righteousness that erects a barrier between him and his father. I've played by the rules. You owe me. You owe me. Because I've played by the rules. And how many older brothers, maybe I are one, maybe you are one, but how many times have you heard people say, well, why did God let this happen to me? I've always done what he wanted me to do. I've always tried to play by the rules. How come this has happened to me? And it's the attitude of the older brother. Why is he serving God? What's his motivation? Or serving his father? What's his motivation? Is his motivation love for him, or is his motivation what he's going to get out of it? And because he's playing by the rules, he feels cheated. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but have you really considered how this parable ends? Because way too often we stop with the kid coming back and dad throwing the feast, and that is not the end of the parable. Not even close. The younger son has been welcomed back home. His return is celebrated, okay? And it should be. And I think Jesus is sending a message to a lot of disenfranchised people that he's been having table fellowship with. Yes, you made a mess of your life, publican. You've made a mess of your life, sinner. You have, all right? But if you want to come home, the Father's perfectly willing to accept you. Come home. It's okay. You can come home. Your Father will celebrate that return. But think about it. The older son remains outside, alienated from his younger brother and his father. Who's in more danger at this point? The younger brother or the older brother? The younger brother's in fellowship with his dad. He's not the one in danger. The one in danger is that elder brother. Because in his self-righteous anger, in his outrage at God's grace, at the fact that God would take him back and celebrate, he stays outside. He won't go in. He's the one now who's out of fellowship with the Father. Who's Jesus talking to? You know who he's talking to. He's talking to those Pharisees, and he's talking to those scribes. And he's saying, gentlemen, do you realize what you're doing to yourselves? Do you realize the position in which you're placing yourselves? And I think it's interesting. He leaves it hanging. He doesn't let you know whether the older son and dad are reconciled or not. He doesn't end it by saying, oh, and the older son finally said, you know, I am glad that my younger brother's come back, and he goes in and he celebrates. He does not say that. He leaves it hanging. The self-righteousness and judgmentalism of elder brethren is every bit as dangerous as the rebellion and selfishness of younger brothers. That's the point that Jesus is making. And it's an incredibly important point. And he wants us to hear it. How and why are you serving the Father? What path have you taken in your life? Some take the path of self-discovery. Some take the path of moral conformity. A lot of us along the way may mix the paths. Follow one for a while and then follow another for a while. But I think what Jesus basically is saying here is you better look in your heart and you better ask yourself, why are you serving the Father? What's your attitude toward the Father? I read a story. This is apocryphal. And I want you to understand it's apocryphal. This isn't out of Scripture, but boy, I think it really made a powerful point with me. It really made me stop and think. It goes like this. Jesus and his apostles are traveling, which they did a lot. And they get up one morning, and after breakfast, Jesus says to the 12, I want you each to pick up a rock and carry it for me. And so each of the 12 go over and they pick up a rock. And Peter, because he's smarter than everybody else, picks up a little rock. Doesn't pick up a big one. Sticks it in his robe. And they walk all morning. They stop for lunch. And Jesus turns those stones into bread. And here's Andrew chomping down on a loaf, and here's Thomas, and he's got a big chunk, and here's Peter, and he's barely got a snack because he just picked up that little rock. After lunch, Jesus says, fellas, I want you to carry a rock for me. Peter goes over, finds the biggest rock he can pick up, and struggles with that baby all afternoon as they walk, carrying a rock. But just wait till supper. So they stop in the evening, and Jesus says, brethren, I want you to take those rocks over, and I want you to toss them all in the stream. And Peter's outraged. I've carried this rock all day. You're supposed to turn this rock into bread, right? And Jesus says to him, Peter, were you carrying that rock for me? Or were you carrying that rock for you? Why are you serving the Lord? Are you serving Him for you? Or are you serving Him because you honor Him and you love Him and you want to do His will? I think it's the kind of question that we all need to search our souls for. And I believe that's one of the reasons why Jesus shared this parable. Because He wants you to look at your relationship with the Father and ask yourself, in my journey, whether that's a journey of self-discovery, whether that's a journey of moral conformity, wherever that journey is, where are you in relation to the Father? And why are you serving Him? In your walk with Him this morning, I don't know where you are in that walk, but if you need our prayers, if you need our help, if you're ready to begin that journey walking hand in hand with Him as you're baptized into Christ, we can help you in any way. Won't you come while we stand and while we sing?
break my heart. Tear the barriers down, show me it, convicting tears, the glory of your wrath. My heart is lost, my soul so weak, the ways of thee, oh, cut so deep. I need you, Lord, to come inside and gently break my heart. My sin is great, and I can see the glory set for me. Show me, Father, where to start, and gently break my heart. My heart is lost, my soul so weak, the ways of thee will press so deep. I need you, Lord.